Behind the familiar, cheerful smile that Tim Conway presented to the world was a man who deliberately kept significant parts of himself hidden, locked away even from those who worked alongside him for decades. The beloved comedian faced heartbreaking personal struggles that the public never fully witnessed, including private self-doubts, the repeated failure of his solo television projects, and a painful family conflict during his final years that threatened to eclipse everything he had built throughout his career. Following his death, several notable figures were conspicuously absent from his burial service. However, the absence of one particular co-star would ultimately reveal that behind the facade of the perpetually laughing entertainer lay secret feuds, hidden tensions, and long-standing misunderstandings. Tim Conway was widely regarded as one of the funniest and most joyful men ever produced by Hollywood. For the millions of viewers who grew up watching The Carol Burnett Show, he was the primary reason they could not stop laughing. He possessed an extraordinary ability to make anything funny, whether a mispronounced word, a fake stumble, or a silly accent, all of which he made appear completely effortless. Yet behind the scenes, circumstances were not always so cheerful. When Conway passed away in 2019, those who knew him best began to comprehend something that fans had never noticed before. He was born Thomas Daniel Conway on December 15, 1933, in Willoughby, Ohio, a suburb of Cleveland. His father, Daniel Conway, was an Irish immigrant who worked as a groomer for polo ponies, while his mother, Sophia Morgoiu, was a first-generation Romanian-American. The family struggled financially during the Great Depression, relocating frequently around the Cleveland area. Money was consistently tight, and stability was a rarity. However, young Tom Conway possessed a talent that would eventually carry him out of Ohio and into television history. He was funny. What made Conway amusing in school was not a rehearsed joke, but rather a problem he did not realize he had. As a child with undiagnosed dyslexia, he would sometimes misread words, which caused everyone to laugh. The specific moment that changed his life occurred during a class reading of a book titled, They Were Expendable. Conway read the title aloud as They Were Expandable, and the class erupted in laughter. In that instant, he realized he was funny, and that was how a learning disability inadvertently launched a comedy career. His original career goal had nothing to do with comedy. He wanted to become a jockey, even though he was terrified of horses. He later developed a passion for thoroughbred racing and occasionally owned racehorses, but the jockey dream never materialized. Instead, he attended Chagrin Falls High School, where he excelled at tumbling and gymnastics. He studied speech and dramatics at Bowling Green State University, majoring in television and radio. While college provided him with a foundation, the Army gave him a story. Conway served in the United States Army from 1956 to 1958, stationed in Seattle, where he sarcastically claimed his mission was to protect the city from the Red Menace. The most famous incident from his military service has since become the stuff of legend. While on guard duty, he fell asleep in a car and forgot his rifle. Desperate, he found a long neon tube in the garbage. When a lieutenant walked by, Conway pointed the tube at him and shouted, "Halt." When the lieutenant asked what the tube was, Conway replied that it was a light bulb and that if the lieutenant came any closer, he would turn it on. The lieutenant had no sense of humor, and Conway was punished with an extra 2 weeks of service painting rocks. After the Army, Conway returned to Cleveland and secured his first television job at a local station. There, he met a man named Ernie Anderson, who would later become famous as the horror host Ghoulardi. Conway later admitted that he had lied to get the job. He told management that Ernie was a talent and that he himself was a director. Even though Ernie had very little talent and Conway had absolutely no directing experience. This lack of experience eventually became apparent when he was given a show to handle. Because he did not know how to back-time movies, calculating the correct timing for commercials, the movies always ran over. To solve this problem, Fridays were dedicated to showing the missed endings from the previous 4 days. The show was so poor that no real guest would agree to appear, so Conway played every guest himself. Ernie Anderson would introduce the world's greatest matador, and Conway would run out to ad-lib an entirely new character without knowing the setup. He played the roles of a matador, a saxophone player, and even an antique dealer. Conway could make anything work. Eventually, he was fired in 1962, partly because he had misled management into believing he had directing experience. The irony is that the executive who fired him actually pushed him toward Hollywood. When Conway hesitated to leave Cleveland for a show called McHale's Navy, the executive made the decision easy by telling Conway he was fired. Before McHale's Navy, however, there was a crucial break. In 1961, actress Rose Marie, who played Sally Rogers on The Dick Van Dyke Show, visited WJW-TV and saw tapes of Conway's skits. She took him under her wing and arranged an audition for The Steve Allen Show. Conway impressed Steve Allen so much that he was given a regular spot. Steve Allen suggested he change his name from Tom to Tim to avoid confusion with a British actor named Tom Conway. McHale's Navy ran from 1962 to 1966, with Conway playing Ensign Charles Parker, the bumbling and naive executive officer. He starred alongside Ernest Borgnine, who became a lifelong mentor, and Joe Flynn. The show produced 138 episodes over 4 seasons and made Conway a recognizable face, but his next project nearly ended his career before it had truly begun. Turn On was a countercultural sketch comedy show created by the producer of Laugh-In, but it is now considered one of the biggest failures in television history. The show was so offensive that several ABC affiliates, including one in Cleveland, refused to return to the program after the first commercial break. Conway remarked that the premiere party he attended was also the cancellation party. The show was pulled after just 1 episode. For a man who made millions of people laugh, Tim Conway carried a surprising amount of weight off stage. Some of it came from the people closest to him. Some came from his own body. And some would not surface until the very end of his life, when those who loved him could no longer agree on how to care for him. The first and perhaps deepest wound came from his own mother. Even after Conway found success on McHale's Navy, a hit show that ran for 4 seasons and made him a recognizable face across America, his mother Sophia was not convinced he had made it. She watched him on television, saw him make millions of people laugh, and still suggested he move back to Ohio to work at a hardware store. In her eyes, that was a real job. What he was doing in Hollywood was something else entirely. Conway asked her if she had been watching television for the past 2 or 3 years, and her response was telling. She said she saw him on television, but that the career was not going to last. She told him he had a chance to get a good, steady job, and that he should take it while he still could. Sophia remained skeptical of show business as a legitimate career until late in her life. The son who made America laugh could not convince his own mother that what he did mattered. That kind of rejection, even from a well-meaning parent, leaves a mark. It is hard to feel like a success when the person who raised you still thinks you should be stocking shelves at a hardware store. Dealing with doubt from his mother was not the only challenge Conway faced. His complicated love life also added to his struggles. Conway found love early in his career, marrying Marion Dalton in 1961. The same year, he landed his first major television break on The Steve Allen Show. It was a year of new beginnings, a new wife, a new career, and a new life in Hollywood. The marriage lasted 17 years, which is a lifetime by Hollywood standards. Together, they had 6 children: Kellyanne, Timothy Jr., Patrick, Jamie, Corey, and Cheyenne. 6 kids in 17 years meant a household that was always busy, always loud, and always full of the chaos that comes with raising a large family. But in 1978, the marriage ended. The divorce was quiet, with no public scandals or headlines. The public never learned exactly what went wrong, and Conway never offered an explanation. 6 years later, in 1984, Conway married again, this time to Charlene Fusco del Sardo Batty. Charlene was not a Hollywood newcomer. She had worked as Carol Burnett's personal secretary, which meant she already knew the world Conway came from. She understood the long hours, the pressure of live television, and the strange rhythm of a comedian's life. Charlene brought a daughter from a previous marriage into the family, making Conway a stepfather. The blended family now included 7 children total, 6 biological children and 1 stepdaughter. By all appearances, it was a happy second act for a man who had spent his first marriage raising 6 kids and then watching that marriage fall apart. But even as Conway seemed to have found stability in his personal life, his body was betraying him in ways he did not want the public to know. He was diagnosed with normal pressure hydrocephalus, a neurological condition that most people have never heard of. The disease causes cerebrospinal fluid to accumulate in the brain's ventricles. That fluid buildup puts pressure on the brain, and over time, that pressure causes real damage. The early symptoms of normal pressure hydrocephalus are subtle: difficulty walking, urinary incontinence, and mild cognitive decline. Nothing that would be obvious to a television audience watching him perform a sketch or voice Barnacle Boy on SpongeBob SquarePants. Conway kept this diagnosis out of the public eye for years while continuing to work. He did not want pity. He just wanted to keep making people laugh. There's something particularly cruel about the disease Conway faced. Unlike Alzheimer's, which has no real treatment and only gets worse over time, normal pressure hydrocephalus is sometimes treatable. Doctors can install a surgical shunt that drains the excess fluid from the brain. For some patients, the improvement is dramatic. They can walk again, their thinking clears, and they get their lives back. But not everyone responds to the treatment, and Conway's case progressed despite whatever medical interventions he received. The symptoms grew worse over time. Walking became more difficult. His cognitive decline became more noticeable. Still, Conway kept working. He voiced characters on animated shows. He made guest appearances, all because he did not want to be remembered as the guy who got sick and gave up. By 2018, when Conway was 84 years old, the private battle could no longer stay private. The people who loved him could not agree on how to care for him. His health had declined to the point where difficult decisions had to be made, and the family he had built over decades could not find common ground. A daughter believed one thing. His wife believed another. At the center of it all was a comedy legend who could no longer speak for himself. The battle began when Conway's daughter Kelly filed court documents asking to be appointed conservator of her father. Kelly was 56 years old at the time, one of the 6 children from Conway's first marriage to Marianne Dalton. Her reason for filing was specific and alarming. She alleged that Conway's wife Charlene was planning to move him out of the excellent skilled nursing facility where he was currently staying and place him into a lesser quality home. Kelly claimed the proposed new facility would not have registered nurses at all times, nor would it have his 24-hour caregiver and speech therapist to help with swallowing. For a man with Conway's medical condition, those were not minor details. They were matters of life and death. Kelly's description of her father's condition in the court filing was devastating. She stated that Conway was almost entirely unresponsive and could not properly provide for his personal needs for physical health, food, and clothing. This was not the Tim Conway millions of Americans remembered from the Carol Burnett Show. This was a man whose body and mind had failed him to the point where he needed around-the-clock care just to survive. A week after her initial filing, Kelly Conway was granted a temporary restraining order preventing Charlene from moving Conway to a new residence. Kelly argued in the documents that Conway currently had his own private room and a caregiver who had been assisting him for 2 years, attending to him 24 hours a day. She also stated that Conway's various medical conditions put him at risk of suffering medical emergencies. Moving him to a facility without the proper staff, she argued, could literally kill him. But in September 2018, a judge rejected Kelly's petition for temporary conservatorship. The fight dragged on for more than a year. Kelly's publicist told USA Today that she was very happy with the outcome after more than a year of fighting to keep her dad safe and sound. But that outcome was not what Kelly had originally asked for. On March 26, 2019, approximately 6 weeks before Conway's death, the legal dispute was settled. The court found clear and convincing evidence that a conservatorship for Conway was necessary. But here is the part that mattered most. Charlene Conway was appointed sole conservator of her husband. The court found her suitable and qualified for the role. According to the court filing, Conway consented to her appointment through his legal representation. The court also declared that Conway was unable to make his own healthcare decisions. That was a formal legal acknowledgement that the man who had made millions of people laugh could no longer make choices for himself. As part of the settlement agreement, Kelly Conway consented to Charlene's appointment. In exchange, she was granted visitation rights and permission to meet with her father's healthcare professionals. It was a compromise. Kelly did not get the control she wanted, but she got the access she needed. The absence of any public will or probate filing for Tim Conway suggests one of several possibilities. His assets may have been placed in a living trust before his sickness incapacitated him, which would bypass public probate entirely. Alternatively, Charlene may have inherited everything as his legal spouse of 35 years under California law, or the March 2019 settlement may have included private financial provisions for the children that were never made public. With Charlene appointed conservator before Conway's death, she controlled his medical care, living situation, and financial affairs in his final months. The conservatorship ended upon Conway's death on May 14, 2019. He was 85 years old. He died at a Los Angeles care facility with his wife Charlene and one of his daughters, Jackie, at his side. The cause of death was complications from normal pressure hydrocephalus. Interestingly, his representatives said that when he died, he had no signs of Alzheimer's or dementia. Conway was buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park in Westwood, California, in the Sanctuary of Prayer section. His grave inscription reads, "Beloved husband, father, and papa," followed by a line that could have come from one of his sketches. "It's hard to be sad when you're laughing. That rainy day is here." The conservatorship battle revealed a family in crisis. But what it did not reveal was something else. Something about the people Conway worked with for decades. Behind the laughter, the broken characters, and the improvised genius, there were tensions, grudges, and colleagues who did not get along with Tim Conway at all. For years, the public never knew. Tim Conway made millions of people laugh, but not everyone found his antics funny. Behind the scenes, there were writers who resented him, guest stars who felt disrespected, and cast members who reached their breaking point. The public never saw any of it. When Conway died in 2019, the public expected to see certain faces at his funeral, but that was not the case. Carol Burnett was not there, but at 86 years old and living out of state, distance was the likely reason. Vicki Lawrence was not there, but she paid public tribute instead. Harvey Korman had died in 2008. Ernest Borgnine had died in 2012. Dick Van Dyke was not there either. He had been a guest star who allegedly did not take a liking to Conway, not a close personal friend. In 1977, Dick Van Dyke learned what it felt like to be on the other side of a Conway improvisation. During a sketch, Conway ad-libbed what became known as the elephant story, describing conjoined Siamese elephants connected at the trunk. But unlike Corman, who had signed up for years of Conway's chaos, Van Dyke was a guest who did not agree to any of it. Sources indicate Van Dyke was visibly annoyed that Conway's antics derailed the sketch from being completed properly. Gary Belkin, one of the show's writers, was also constantly angry about what Conway did. He explained that it was usually a choice between a well-written sketch and a bloopers episode, and the producers decided audiences would rather see the bloopers version. Belkin added that the shame of it was that Conway was always better in the first straight performance. People did not get to see what a great comic actor he was when he was not focusing on trying to make Harvey Korman break character. One of the most telling moments came from Vicki Lawrence. Before the elephant story taping, Carol Burnett took Lawrence aside and demanded she keep it together, and Lawrence agreed. Then the director told her that Conway was changing his elephant story and wished her good luck. Lawrence later vented to her husband, a makeup artist on the show, about Conway always getting to go off the rails. Her husband listened and then gave her a simple piece of advice. He told her to give Conway a taste of his own medicine. The next time Conway started ad-libbing, Lawrence fired back with a line that was not in the script, asking him if he was finished with his little performance. It was a rare moment of genuine frustration slipping through on air. Some critics labeled Conway's habit of making cast members break character as unprofessional and rude to the audience. The late comedian Phyllis Diller publicly criticized Conway and Corman's on-screen breaking, calling it rude because it signaled to the audience when to laugh rather than letting the comedy stand on its own.